Got a monochromatic box with a rack and pinion in it. I've got a monochromatic car that needs a rack and pinion in it. So the reasonable thing to do is to put it in. Got the vehicle jacked up, I got the steering wheel centered, everything's ready to go. I just checked this real quick. The alignment's been great on this. But basically I'm gonna check the reveal. Should be just like slightly toe out. When I look at it, it's like dead on. This one's slightly toe out, like 1/8 of an inch. So if you fall asleep, your car goes off the right side of the road and not into oncoming traffic. So looking underneath, I have 3 leaks that are affecting this. This is the engine oil cooler. I've got an O-ring leak from that. And then the rack and pinion bellows is just wide open, gooey, gross. And then I've also got, looks like a leak here. And then these are dripping. Normally you'd want to do new tie rods, but these are nice and tight, and I'm on a budget, so I'm not going to. I'm going to check the ball joints by wiggling these in and out. Everything feels really tight, so it shouldn't be a problem. I'm just going to throw this steering wheel brace in now, and that way my clock spring and everything's protected. Clock springs for the airbag, or if you have steering wheel controls. So it's nice and locked up and centered. One of the nice things about using the cordless stuff is you're not knocking your tripod over with your air hose. So just going to reach in here and pull these cotter pins out. You straighten the pin, push it through, grab as much as you can, and then you just use it like this. These particular side cuts are made for doing electrical work. I think they're GB brand, but I like them because they got a little curve to them. It really helps to pry things. 19. I gave up easy. I was going to show you, if you have a stuck one, you can just hit it real hard right there. It'll come out, but it was even easier than that. So we've got the nut loosened up. So go ahead and harvest this. We'll be using it later. If they drag or it's hard to get them, this one's really easy. But what you can do is just take your box end wrench, get it to the tapered section, and just unscrew them this way. So we'll grab the inner tie rod here. I don't know if we're going to need this nut, probably not. But we got it if we need it. This tie rod's really stuck. It won't come out, even if you hit it on the top here. But if you hit it here, hit it hard, but they'll just drop right out. It just vibrates. You can see this is tapered, and it breaks the cold weld. It'll just fall right out. Then we'll grab the inner tie rod end, and you can take a wrench or something, wrap it around here, and you can get it crack loose, and hopefully just spin right out. This plate's in the way of getting the rack and pinion down, so I'm just going to zip it off and hold those nuts still. You see where it's been leaking, it's all wet with all kinds of junk. With the plate out of the way and with things wiped up, we'll go ahead and get in with a 14mm and pull the mounting brackets for the rack. Then we just have the input shaft nut and bolt, and then we'll have the 2 lines to disconnect. Now we've got a little flexibility to gain access to that nut and bolt there. The 2 lines we're going to undo is here and here. I may undo this one as well. This is just a 10mm and just a little anti-vibration bracket so that they don't wear into each other. I've got some really smushy, gross lines there. And I'm going to definitely need to do a new O-ring on this one. It looks like the union's leaking. I'm going to replace this line while I'm in here. This would be a real good thing to pull down and get it to drain from. And then I'm going to be pulling the little 10mm bolt that you see here, because these lines are going to stay in place pretty much. This one's going to pull down out of the way. this one is going to separate. And then while I have it down, I'm going to inspect the rest of this union, because I think that there's a cooked O-ring in this part right up here. Looks like it's been leaking from up there. So I've got this line undone, which is a return line, and now I'm just pulling off the brackets and all the little rubber bushings and packaging stuff that's going to go on the new one. Just try to keep the matching bushings and things together. That way it's easier when you go to put it back. As usual, there's an easy way and a hard way. And the easy way to get to the bolt that does the steering input shaft is just get an extension and go over the top of the CV axle and then hook up your impact there. If you have your wheel centered, it should be pointing straight back at you. There isn't days of room, but there's plenty. Using a pry bar as a drift up through the hole that the lines and everything go through, you can get the pry bar right up against the coupler and then just tap lightly and the input shaft will release the, there we go, it'll release like that. Once you get that input shaft disconnected, it just doesn't seem fair because everything's so easy and accessible after that. You can take a line wrench if you want, but these are a little easier. It's a crow's foot line wrench. You just set that on there. This one should be a 14. You can see it just mates up in there. And that way you don't have to have a wrench in that tight spot. You crack it loose, go back a little, wiggle it off, and then you can just turn it out the rest of the way. You can creep it out or whatever you want to do. But that's the last thing holding it in is this line right here. So you can either undo this line, oh excuse me, this line under here. It's the one with the little boot on it earlier. So you can either undo the other end of this if you're going to do it anyway and drop it out and then put the other back on, or you can take it off at this point. It's up to you. If you have a little experience under your belt and you know how easy it is to mess up the threads on these and you know to be careful and be gentle as you're looking for tension, you can take a stubby wrench and pull this one off. But if you're not real experienced, if you haven't done a few rack and pinions before, what I would do is just undo the line on the other end of this. That's going to be a lot less trouble for you. So the one that you do is the one that's on the outboard side back up in here. But anyway, you just take the line, tuck it under here, or it'll just all come down as a unit, and just slide out the driver's side first. If you want to pull one of the boots and pull the inner tie rod, you can. The other thing that you can do is get that shaft to clear by rotating it around. If you grab this and point it down, then there's nothing to keep you from just trucking on that way and then back this way. I'm gonna do it that way, but I do need to get rid of this camera because I'll need two hands. So I got my shaft pointed down. Just keep on trucking. Hold this around and then come back the other way. So we got the old one out, and while we do, we're gonna want to harvest this little line and fitting that you see here. We're going to want to take that off and transfer it to the new one. Looks like it's about a 17 millimeter. So I've got this fitting out, and this fitting was blocking in the bracket. It actually came in looking like that. It's a 17 millimeter, crack it free, you can get the rest by hand. There's a little rubber O-ring on there. You'll want to replace that. It only goes on one way, and it's the same length on each side, so you can't really get it backwards, front or back. And just make sure that when you start these threads that you're real good and straight. If you cross thread these, which is so easy to do, it's just going to be a huge headache for you. I think they get a lot of these that go back to the remanufacturer where people have cross threaded them. Especially you're going to run into trouble on that front side if you're not really careful. Why they call it a rack and pinion? It looks like saw teeth, and then this is a little pinion gear. So you got one little gear here, and then there's just a bunch of teeth, and it just shoves the teeth side to side. So I've got the input shaft back on and bolted in. You want to do that first before you secure it. Instinctively, you want to just get it secured first and then pull it down on, but it works a lot better if you have a little wiggle room to work with. So mine's all bolted up, and I got my line put on. You want to tighten that up before you get up in there because there's not a lot of space to work. I've got my bracket here in place. So got this bracket zipped up. The O-rings that came with the kit didn't fit, so I had to make do with the old ones. Maybe I'll be pulling this down again soon, who knows. I can leave the other, can leave everything hooked up and the alignment on. I'm tired. So last thing I want to do, or the next thing I want to do, is get a new hose for this. I need to measure what this one is and get a new piece in there. This will pivot, it's supposed to, and that'll enable me to stick it on here and then fold it back like this and put it on. I think this one's sweating. Must be hot. Now ideally what you want to do is you want to put it on an alignment rack and just do it all pretty. But since I don't have one and we need this car today, because we're going to go on a drive, I got a bunch of this moving plastic, or this heavy duty plastic. You put baby powder in between the layers of it and then set it down on an elevated surface, a box, a brick, or these ramps. Whatever you got to do, you get it up off the ground, and that way you can turn the steering wheel and basically it'll move the wheels easily. So I'm just turning the steering wheel and they're able to move pretty freely. So that's gonna work. You know, on these Subarus, you always got to replace all 4 tires at the same time. So say I drove it like that, say I didn't do it good, and I noticed it was a little bit towed in once it was on the ground and not floating. If I'd have driven it like that, it would have caused a bunch of problems on the outside of the tire, and then I'd have been hosed. I'd have to get 4 new tires. Run it out on the highway. First time I run it on the highway, I get to my destination and it's moaning like it's low on power steering fluid. The oil leak's doing great, no problems there. But the rack's leaking from the boot on this side, out both ends. You see on this end it's leaking too. It's just totally full of fluid inside where the boot is. It's a brand new rack. It's got like 30 miles on it. When you look at this one, it's doing the same thing. It's leaking from the end. You can see a little bit of fluid there. It's not as bad as the other side, but you know, same deal. It blew the clamp off of this side and it's leaking from this side. I'm disgusted. This is really, really sad. It didn't leak for the first little while. I did a bunch of test drives, made sure the alignment was good, and look at just the mess it made on the downpipe. Big old mess on the downpipe, big mess everywhere. Had to stop and buy transmission fluid overpriced from the gas station just to not be moaning everywhere. What a nightmare. I hate dealing with shitty parts like that. I'm glad I didn't pay for an alignment. If I'd have paid somebody to get this aligned and then had to do it again, I'd be really upset. So here's the 2 racks. This one's an ATSCO or 3F, which means new fluid, flush it, filter in line or whatever. That's what they're saying to do. So ATSCO, they've been around forever. It looks old school, it's black. I'm hoping to get a lot better results, and there's some really positive things just right out the gate. When I got this one, the box had a hole poked through it by the input shaft. There was no cap or anything like this, no caps on the inner tie rods. And the boots were the biggest thing. I mean, when you look at this, there's a bunch of different places. This is a really universal inner tie rod end, so they can put boots pretty much anywhere. But the boots on this thing are just clownish. I mean, these seem like they're a lot better quality. When these first came out of the box, it was set clear back up here, but it made this bulge out so big that it wouldn't clear the body. The unibody was in the way, which means it's just going to chew it up and self-destruct, so I lengthened it so that it would be okay. I'm just really disgusted in this rack and pinion. There's a number of reasons. I've had problems with ATSCO in the past where what had something like this was cross-threaded, and that's frustrating. That's really annoying. That's out of my control. But looking at this just looks clownish. You look at all the, I mean, it's multiple bends, not just a single bend or a couple bends. Look how parallel these lines are, and look how these are just all over the place. I don't know if that was done in shipping. Obviously there were some problems in shipping with the input shaft, But anyway, here's just something to look for. If I pull another one of these out of the box, I'm just going to send it right back. I'm not going to waste any time trying to put one of these in ever again. It looked like it was leaking from this gasket too. It's just all the way around. It just seemed like it just wasn't done well. This says remanufactured in Mexico. There's a bunch of fluorescent stickers like that saying how important it was to flush the system and everything. And it is. It had a bright remanufactured sticker, but it got leaked on because the thing leaks everywhere. You see all these quality control paint marks on it where somebody checked it, but if the seal was blown out the end from the get-go, I don't know what you say. How do you screw that up? I wish I could just buy a kit and remanufacture my own, to be honest with you, but it just seems like nobody sells those these days. They're hard to find. I have the second rack and pinion in place, and I have it bolted up nice and snug. All the lines are on except for the brackets and stuff. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull these back down to get the input shaft back on, but I like to get it up in this position so that I can basically, it's a little hard with one hand, but basically I want to measure between the end of the inner tie rod. I aim it so that it's pointed just right at the line at the bottom of the steering knuckle where the tie rod goes. So this one's at about 3 3/4 of an inch at the center of the hole. That's after I've made some adjustment. It was at 4 inches and then this one was at 3 inches. And I measure on this and I can't do it with my right knee, get them so that they're the same. It should be about 3 3/4 of an inch. And that way everything's going to be good to go when you do your input shaft. I have the steering wheel braced with the wheel brace to the seat. And then I'll just basically, I'll lower both of these bolts down to where they're just hanging, and these as well, and then I'll be able to get that shaft on there. That makes it so that you're nice and even, so that when you make a U-turn you're good, your clock spring's good, and when you go to align it, it's good. Basically it has the same structural integrity, number of threads on both sides, and that's what we're looking for. One other tip that I'd like to add, given that I had to do this twice, I got to cut this a little bit short, but look how pretty these lines look in here. To get the rack out, you want to drop your bolts. You just leave the bracket in here, drop the bolts and pull the bracket off of this side. What you do is you pull it down and you get your lines so that they're up in here, and you just rotate it. So you're gonna have to bend your inner tie rods. The old one's easy, it'll just flop and behave, but the new one will be kind of hard to move. As you can see, these are a little bit stiff. They just really stay in place. Work them around a little bit, and basically you just get it so that you can have them pointed up this way, and then you can get your input shaft to clear out of the hole right here. There's just a little thing. So the input shaft, you're gonna push the whole thing up in there, and then just basically drop it down and out. So you're gonna have to mess with the lines, basically just get them on this side of the stabilizer or the other side, you know, either up or down, so that it can come down and then go this way. Once you can clear the input shaft, you slide it all the way this way until this end comes out, and then you just slide it down that way and you're free. On closer inspection of this Atsko rack and pinion with the 3F on it, it's a little disappointing to see that they're reusing old tie rod ends. I mean, I'm using old outer tie rod ends, but the inner ones have obviously been there, done that. You can see the rust marks, and then also when I went to put on the nuts, they don't spin freely. The other rack and pinion at least had new inner tie rod ends. This one's got rust marks and clean marks where the nut was, and it's got vice grip marks in both tie rod ends. And you can say, oh, well, it's part of the manufacturing procedure and all this and that. But yeah, but rust and those marks and the buggered up threads from rust, new ones don't have that. So now what we're gonna do is take a 13mm wrench. I don't know why these are 13 and not 12, but when you turn this in or out, you can see how it screws into it or out, and then the boot gets all jacked up on this side. So get the boot happy, and then I'm going to take some 90-degree pliers and take the clamp off and scoot it up so I can turn this freely. But this is a ball and socket joint inside of here, so that can spin freely. And then once I have the nut loose right here, the holding nut, I can turn this and it basically will send this in or out, and that's how you get your alignment on this side. Got that one out of the way. Get this one real quick. Now I can take my, so I've got a 17 millimeter. You can see that this is notched here, and then a 19 for this for when it's time. But the steering wheel's all braced up, so I need to get this one so that it's perfectly straight. So I'm going to take a light and shine it on that part of the tire. So I move my head in and out like this a lot while I'm doing this. So I want this one just barely towed out. You got to get these right. You know, the camber and caster, all that kind of stuff's going to be the same. The only thing that we're affecting is the toe. So we're going to get this just the same like it was before. That's it right there. So we'll tighten the nut down. When I have 2 wrenches and you hold both of them. So you want to hold this so that your tie rod is nice and straight with the bottom. You can see how the tie rod can twist one way or the other. You want it just nice and relaxed when your reading's perfect, and then hold it that way so that when you tighten it down it stays in that position. So if you get them close like that, you can just rotate the other one down, snug it up good. I'm going to do that with 2 hands later, but that side's done and good to go. And then you come over onto this side. Remember, this is the one that you have to have just a little bit towed out. We're way towed out right now. So what I'm going to do is take that 13 millimeter wrench and the same thing on this side. So if it's towed out, I need this thing to come in. So I'm just going to tighten it clockwise into that tie rod. These tires are brand new. I'm going to keep them that way. Almost there. Boy, I was way off on this one, on the setup. Okay, I went just a little too far. I'll do like 1/8 of a turn. A little bit more. Alright, so we're towed out. Just, let's come back 1/8 of a turn. There we go. I like that. So those last little adjustments, I'm only moving about this much to get it just right where I want it to be. And now that I just messed it up, let's do it again. That's about how it was. I'll pull it in just a little. Right there. Perfect. So then we just do the same thing with our nut here. Make sure that our tie rod is in a happy place. Thinking happy thoughts. We'll tighten that down too.